Today, let's look at the topic asset liability mismatch. Okay, so let's understand what is asset, what is liability, and what is mismatch between them. So, when you own something, then it is called as an asset, and when you are responsible for something which of others is with you, then you are liable to that person. That means you are responsible to that person. And mismatch is between the what you own and what you are responsible for the other person. For an example, let's consider you are having a bike, you give it to your friend. Okay, then it is your asset, and your friend is liable to you for that bike, that he has to give you back the bike very safe. Okay, so let's look the same understanding with respect to banks, and then we'll understand what is the importance of this asset liability mismatch and how it hinders the lending of the banks, or how much it creates problems to the bank. Okay, so bank, the main source of bank are deposits. So first thing to be noted, so where do banks get money? So they do borrow it from RBI, or the most of the revenue is from the people who keep their money with the banks as a saving or as a fixed deposit or a recurring deposits. So mostly that it gets money from the deposits. Okay, so these deposits are short to medium term maturity ones. So what is this short to medium term? So no person will be willing to keep his money with somebody for a long time. Will you give your bike for your friend for a long time? That's not possible, right? So you max to the max, bank or the people customer would be looking at an interest where it has to get back his money with the profit within a short span of time or a medium time, so which is 3 to 5 years, which is mostly deposited by the peoples. Okay, now what happens when banks do get this kind of money from the depositor? It cannot keep the money with them, so it has to make profit using that money, correct? So what it does, it gives loans to the borrowers, it gives money to the borrower as loans. Okay, and the borrower is obviously clever, he cannot go and afford for a short term loans. Okay, what is the short term loans? For an example, if somebody is buying a house loan, okay, for 20 lakhs, would the person who borrowed it, can he repay it within 2 years or repay it within 5 years? Which is not possible for the borrower. But the bank has to pay the money, which is say few 50,000 is belong to a deposit which has 5 years of maturity. After 5 years, the bank has to give this 50,000 to the person who has deposited it. But the bank do gets its complete money, say in a housing loan, mostly like 20 years or a long term loans. So it gets after 20 years, let's assume it like that. So but it has to pay within 5 years, but it gets the wholesome amount after 20 years. So now what happens? It is responsible for a deposit in a short term, and it has given its asset to somebody else in a long term. So for a bank, a loan is an asset because it gets repaid after sometimes. So you give your bike and you get it back after some time. So loan is kind of a asset, but it is liable to the depositors for its deposit. Say 50,000, they have kept it with a fixed deposit with you. After 5 years, you have to give them back. You cannot say have given it as a loan. So what happens when banks give more loan and the depositors also maturities also comes after 5 years, then there is a mismatch happening between the asset and the liability. So that mismatch is called as asset liability mismatch. Okay, so now how it is problematic to the banks? It creates two risk to the banks. Okay, it creates two important risk to the bank. One is interest rate risk and another one is liquidity risk. So what is this interest rate risk? So what happens is bank will get deposits if it gives more interest to the person who is keeping the deposit. Okay, I will go keep it in a bank. Which banks offer me more interest rate? Okay, after 5 years, this interest rate would be repriced. Say today the inflations are in control, so today I am giving you at a 3%. I cannot give the same interest rate after 5 years. So you have to reprice the interest rate to match that 2025 situation. Okay, after 5 years, for an example. But whereas it gives a loan at say 2%, to an housing loan to a borrower, which 20 years of repayment time. So now this 2% cannot be changed. So this interest rate remains same. Nobody will go borrow it from a bank which changes its interest rate very frequently. So such kind of changing interest rate loans, which is given by the banks, are called floating loans. So that's a different topic altogether. So we'll not look at here. So it cannot, or the customers or the borrowers will not be willing to borrow a changing interest rates. Say today it is say 2%. After say 2026, I'm changing the interest rate is 10%. Okay, based on that time's bank's current situation. So will you pay this extra interest? So it is not possible. So now this is the problem here. Now what happens? It has to pay more interest to the depositor after 5 years. Say after 5 years, 3% interest is not accepted, so it has to give 6% interest. But after 5 years also, it will get same 2% of interest from the loan. Now you see, it is giving more, but it is getting less and giving more. So this is one of the risk which bank faces. Okay, so the second problem is liquidity risk. Say for an example, the bank has a money of 20 lakhs with it, and it has given loan for 15 lakhs to person A, and it has given 3 lakhs to person B. So now how much is the remaining it has? Say 2 lakhs it is the remaining, which it is utilizing for its day-to-day operations. Say 1000 rupees deposit deposit has been taken by the customer who has given. Okay, so but it has to repay it anytime, so the bank is liable. But if you see, it had 20 lakhs, but after giving loans to 2%, its liquidity or the money with the bank is getting decreased. So this liquidity will not come back to it until that long term is completed. Say until the 20 years is completed, you cannot get this 15 plus 3, say 18 lakhs back to the banks. Even though he pays EMI, you will not get the wholesome amount. So the liquidity with the bank is going down. So if the liquidity goes down, then the bank cannot offer more loans to the new people. So when somebody else comes for money for the bank asking for a loan, but you don't have a money with you to spend it. So it's an hypothetical scenario. All our banks are like almost having a certain sets of assets with them, so they can rotate it. But still, this is the problem with asset liability mismatch and how it affects the bank.